Oh, Carabast, my arm, it's cut. Oh, little green fellow, he's eating me. Oh no, he loves me. Hey, I'm your buddy.
I can bring you in warm, or if I can bring you in cold.
Hello, welcome to Galactic Initiative. I'm your host, Jeff. Joining me, as always, David and Sean. Welcome, David.
Hello, sir.
Welcome, Sean.
Hello, my friend.
In this show, we will cover the two-part Season 1 Mandalorian finale. So Chapters 7 and 8. We'll start with Chapter 7, The Reckoning, directed by Deborah Chow. Chapter 7 opens on the Razor Crest with a holographic message from Greef Karga. Greef wants to call it even with Mando and requests help to rid Navarro of despotic rule. Apparently, after the Mandalorian covert saved Din Djarin from the Guild's bounty hunters, the client and a growing number of ex-Imperial guards took over. Greef emphasizes the Imperials' relentlessness to convince Mando that killing the client will be the only way to save the child.
I think that as we've moved through this season, the Mando has started to realize that there is the only course of action is to really go and take out the client. He's beginning to realize that he will always be hunted. And so this message is probably articulating something that the Mando has known for a long time. The convenience of it, however, it's exactly what he needs. It should be warning the Mando that this is probably a trap, or that at the very least he should be very cautious moving into this. I mean, obviously he's noted over the course of the season the discrepancies and the things that he's been told by Greef Karga and the fobs that were issued for this particular bounty and all those things. I would hope that he is starting to have a very skeptical eye when it comes to dealing with Karga moving into this.
Well, what more obvious signal could there be that this is a trap? Now, I know there's an exchange a bit later between Mando and Cara on board the Razor Crest, where Mando indicates that, yeah, he realizes there could be trouble. This might not be on the up and up, but he needs to go through with it anyway. Is he really this naive?
Well, I mean, it's indicative of what we've seen before. He's made some dumb choices. He's been very trusting when he shouldn't have. And some of it, we would like to think that, the Mando is he's playing this long game and that he knows that it's a bad idea, but he's going to go along with it because he wants to lure his enemies into a false sense of security because they think they've duped him. But then it turns out he's really been duped. So again, in this one, like you say, he mitigates that later with the conversation with Cara Dune. But yeah, you wonder initially in the moment, are you really falling for that?
Yeah, Greef shouldn't care about the child at all at this point. If he really just wants to be rid of the Imperials, it doesn't matter. Bring the child to fate. It's so obvious. It's right there.
Well, yeah, and if he had just said, "Hey, we need to kill the client and come to my place and we'll talk about it," and then if they sit down and say, "Well, how can I get close to him?" I mean, clearly the town's under occupation, and then they come up with the plan to use the child as bait. That might be more believable as like we're working together to solve this problem. But yeah, the first thing he says is, "Hey, Mando, you still got that green thing? I really need you to bring it down here like tomorrow." Maybe it's something that gets lost in translation through the helmet.
Nice. Mando returns to the planet Sorgan and recruits Cara Dune. When he arrives, she is fighting a Zabrek in the local cantina for credits. Mando outlines Greef's request, but she refuses to help. She cites her wanted status with the New Republic and her desire to avoid soldiering. But Mando's clarification that the target is an Imperial changes her mind.
We don't talk about Fight Club, but here we are going to talk about Fight Club. Pretty entertaining. It's a fist fight between two people. The belts, how they are connected to one another, kind of brought me back to old school NWA pro wrestling. Greg the Hammer Valentine and Roddy Piper. And then the way that they finished that fight, tap the belt instead of a person like tapping out. You really got a sense of Cara Dune can definitely take care of herself. She's smiling, really enjoying the fighting. So that I really like the fight.
I enjoyed it as well. Again, it builds on the character of Cara Dune as pretty hardcore. I did like the gladiatorial aspect of it. being chained together and all that kind of stuff with through that electrical field. Since we saw her last, this is what she's doing now to pay the bills. And it's sort of a nod to Gina Carano and her previous career as an MMA fighter. I thought it was also interesting that the dropping the hint that she is wanted by the Republic, even though she's a former Republic soldier. It gives another layer to the character that I hope we see explored more in the future. What is it that happened to her in her past that made her go from being a member of the Republic military, being probably highly decorated, having gone through all these types of missions and hunting down Imperials and doing all this stuff. What happened between then and now that has now made her hide out in this backwater and fight guys in a bar for dinner. She's like, not interested, not interested, not interested. And then he says, well, we're going to kill some Imperials. And she's like, sign me up. That again speaks to some other things that may have happened in her past, or perhaps the reason why she's wanted by the New Republic. That maybe she hates Imperials so much she doesn't really care about the law.
Clearly, there's some joy in combat for her, which perfect writing to go with the casting. It all fits. But yeah, that gleam in her eye. She's holding the drink, and she takes only a moment to reflect. But she's in. Yeah, she's all in.
On the table, I noticed Dominoes and obviously chicken wings, but I have never seen Dominoes in Star Wars. Do you guys happen to know what type of game that she was maybe playing?
I have no idea. Sabac's supposed to be a card game, but then Disney released a thing that was cards and tiles and whatever when they sold the game after the Solo movie.
And I have
so
it. I have the game, and it's not that.
Okay. So I don't know. It's probably a nod to Rebels or something, or Clone Wars, or from the novel Truce at Bakura or something like that. Some kind of deep cut into Legends. Who knows? Maybe one of our fans can chime in on that.
After departure from Sorgan, the child tries to disable or divert the Razor Crest by seizing its controls. The moment is enough to convince Mando that the child will need supervision during the coming mission. On Arvala 7, he asks the Ugnaught Queel for assistance. IG-11 enters Queel's hut with tea for the visitors. Din Djarin's history with droids and first-hand experience with this droid cause alarm. Queel has reprogrammed IG-11 after salvaging it from the scene of battle in Chapter 1. A montage confirms the truth of his words. We see IG-11 learning to walk, move crates, feed blurgs, and serve tea. Queel agrees to join Mando not for payment, but to protect the child from Imperial slavery. The Empire's brutal history adds 2 more members to Djarin's team, 5 if you count the blurgs.
Absolutely gorgeous CGI for a landing of a spaceship. Beautifully done. Really liked it. The montage. I'm not a big fan of montages. I know I've made that very clear. But it did add to the story of IG-11 is now a servant droid. One other thing that I enjoyed, the interaction with the blurg. I wish they would come out with a blurg figure. I don't know why they don't have a Star Wars figure, but for whatever reason they have chosen not to do it. But I mean, I like that they're incorporating the blurg into this storyline, and it obviously helps out later on.
This scene's actually packed with all kinds of great world building and fleshing out of characters. So we have a conversation here that talks about Queel's history, the fact that he's been a slave for the 3 lifetimes of men, which again makes him quick to jump at the opportunity to help prevent someone like the child from being put into any kind of slavery. So anyway, he also talks about how he worked in the gene tanks or whatnot. So he has a understanding of cloning. And so he opines about the child being, an actual freeborn and evolving creature as opposed to one that was created in the tanks. And then he makes the side comment about how he's too ugly to be a clone, kind of a thing, which is kind of funny coming from an Ugnaught. We have this whole the playing on Din Djarin's distrust and hatred of robots, and we have to have the montage, David, because otherwise, if he comes into the hut with the tea, And he just, and then Quill just says, "Oh, he's a servant droid now," and everybody's like, "Oh, okay," and moves on. There would be a gap there. It would be a leap of faith and trust on the part of all the characters and the audience. I don't know how you made it actually through the 80s watching movies with the hatred of montages, because that's like pretty much every movie made between like 79 and 92. But something that I thought was going to happen much earlier in the series is the building of this team. I mean, we're getting that. It kind of took a side trip before we actually got the band back together and on that big mission or whatnot. But again, it was interesting. I enjoyed the montage. I thought it was fun. There's another interesting reference in there where Quill's talking about under the laws of the Charter of the New Republic, claiming salvage of the droid, things like that. I mean, it's just not throwaway lines, but these little side comments or parts of the dialogue there that build more backstory and give us more texture to the world that these people are operating in.
The director and the producers, they want us to believe in IG-11. I thought it might have been more interesting without the montage. I agree with you, Sean. To a certain extent, we need it. But if it had been shorter and perhaps less convincing, it would have created an interesting uncertainty in our minds. And until we got to a moment of adversity and a moment of truth, a turning point, and we saw the droid do the right thing, that would have played into Mando's fears. So I wish they hadn't given us so much and left that uncertainty in our minds. Like, oh, has it really been reprogrammed? Can we trust it? It basically let us feel the same way the Mando feels about the droid.
True. When you do have the moment of truth, they try and give you that, which has been decided already based on the montage and how thorough it is. I mean, it does a couple of things. I mean, it establishes Quill's skills and the things that he's capable of doing. It also gives us his interesting philosophical observations on what droids are. How droids act is not the droid, it's the programmer. And I can make it do anything, and it's not going to hurt you because I changed its nature. It's another nice sort of esoteric kind of observation on the nature of artificial intelligence and droids and in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, agreed. And he mentions an interesting droid piece. He says that he reconstructed IG-11's neural harness, a droid having a neural as a nerve-related harness. Pretty cool.
Well, yeah, especially since Din Djarin put a big burning hole in it when he shot him in the head. So.
Yeah, true.
Move along.
During the flight to Navarro, Mando arm wrestles Cara. The child misinterprets the friendly contest as a threat and force chokes Cara until Mando notices and corrects him.
I like the unpredictability of the child with its powers, not necessarily knowing when to use them, when not to use them. Acting like a child. That was kind of cool. I mean, seeing something wrong, regardless of whether they understand what is truly going on, could have very easily force choked her out.
Again, it's a reinforcing aspect of the relationship that has been built between these two characters. Mando has spent a lot of time protecting Baby Yoda, and Baby Yoda, when he sees an opportunity where he believes he's protecting Mando, he's going to do it. But yeah, it was a very sort of dark side way of doing it. Instead of maybe pushing her away or levitating her like you did to the Mudhorn or whatever, he full on goes right for the throat. And then that leads, of course, to the larger discussion with Quill about the Jedi and all of that.
No one around Mando, they all have pieces of the story, but no one completely understands the Force. And this will come up later with the Armorer. And we've joked about the Star Wars timeline and how the Jedi, it really wasn't that long ago. There were thousands of Jedi fighting the Clone Wars around the galaxy, and okay, they're all gone. No one knows anything about the Force anymore. Fun scene though. And of course then we get to see Quill building. He can just build a pram from spare parts that he found on the Razor Crest. So, and this guy's, he's handy.
I understand that he's handy. I find it far-fetched that all of a sudden he's able to find enough scrap metal to build himself a pram, and pretty much the exact same thing that they've already used. I question that part.
David, you clearly didn't listen to him tell you that this is what you can do if you learn to use your hands. He spent 3 human lifetimes working with his hands. And he also told you that he reconstructed the neural harness of an assassin droid.
I know.
Clearly, he knows how to take a stroller and attach it to your wristband. Okay.
he's MacGyver. He asked for
MacGyver.
He asked for a piece of chewing gum, a shoelace, and one of Mando's blasters, and he built a pram.
Exactly.
He's amazing.
I had the same thought, David. What did they salvage to build the metal egg? Grief Karga and 3 bounty hunters are waiting for the Razor Crest in the lava fields far away from the town. Mando, Cara, and Queel ride blurgs. Grief recognizes Cara Dune as a rebel shock trooper, and he strangely, warmly greets the child. The group must camp outside the town to be ready for action by first light. At their campsite, large winged lizards attack by surprise. One of the bounty hunters and one of the blurgs are carried off, and one of the blurgs is killed. Grief Karga's right arm gets slashed and poison is detected. The child uses the Force to heal the wound.
That is quite a bit. I have a. First of all, I mean, Din Djarin struggled mightily riding the blurg, but Cara Dune just hops on like she's been there, done that. When the dragons came in, they reminded me of the Minots from Empire Strikes Back. But my biggest issue is you have a bounty hunter, you have a Republic guard, you've got these other bounty hunter wannabe guys from the guild. Nobody can hit anything. I think Din Djarin, he hits one with the flamethrower, and Cara Dune's got the rapid fire machine gun. She's not hitting anything. I mean, it's like they're all stormtroopers, for crying out loud. I mean, it was a good 30 to 45 seconds of them hitting nothing, which was kind of shocking. The Force healing thing was definitely foreshadowing for Rise of Skywalker, because they used it extensively in that movie. But I thought it was as well done to be able to save Grief Karga. I think that allowed Grief to care about it more because the child helped him out. But yeah, I mean, my biggest issue was just them rapid firing and not being able to hit anything for as long as they did.
So this whole scene, I don't. To me, it doesn't serve any purpose in the show. This whole thing was inserted as a commercial for the Rise of Skywalker, trying to establish Force healing already exists in the Star Wars universe, so it's not a new Force power we're introducing in Rise of Skywalker. No, this is a Disney Force power. But anyway, so we move on. The dragons or whatever they were flying around, and yeah, it thins out the herd, so to speak. Gets rid of one of Grief Karga's guards, which will be important later. But it doesn't really do anything for the story. The scene could have been reworked to do more for character building other than just introducing a Force power. I remember when there was all this marketing going on right before the episode came out saying, oh, you have to watch this episode of The Mandalorian because there's a huge tie-in to the sequel trilogy. And I watched this episode and I was like, I saw nothing in this show that ties to the sequel trilogy. And then the next week I went and saw Rise of Skywalker and I'm like, oh, really? That's it? That's the big thing? I just feel like there's time that they wasted in this episode that could have been devoted to other things. You know, all of them sitting around the campfire and talking and feeding Baby Yoda. I mean, it could have been a very interesting moment there. You could have had a conversation between Grief and Mando and Cara Dune about, and also Queel about the fall of the Empire. They could have been talking about the client and the Imperials who are on this planet, why they're there, why they're allowed to still be there, why the New Republic hasn't come and got them yet. What is the struggle that the New Republic is having trying to stamp out the remnants of the Empire, or just maintain governance over the galaxy? Like, why Cara Dune is wanted. A little bit more about Mando's childhood, you know, whatever. Queel talking about his time in the gene vats on whatever planet. We could have got more about Grief Karga. We could have learned a little bit more about him and what he was doing and why he's, you know, how he became head of the guild or at least the guild on this planet. There's so many other things we could have done that would have helped make the characters more robust, the world that they work in more robust. Not my favorite scene in this episode, and to David's point, like everybody became a stormtrooper for a minute there, and I guess that's equal opportunity. So now you can't accuse Star Wars of only making stormtroopers bad shots, but it did get a little egregious. Point blank, you can't hit this thing. It's sitting on top of you and trying to eat you, and you still can't hit it with your blaster, and it's just
Force healing is all over the EU, now Legends. It never sat well with me, but there's some precedent, all this material that doesn't exist, that you can't draw on to create shows and movies in the present day. But yeah, there's a character that worked for Han and Leia, basically took care of their kids, and she was a Jedi Force healer. Clearly, Lucas didn't want to use it, which doesn't mean it's not right that it can never be used, but he steered clear of it. So I think with the established rules, Force healing probably a step too far. As far as the scene with the dragons, the winged lizards, are you sure they're missing? They might be hitting to no effect. Did they really miss?
They missed a lot. When they did hit, it didn't have an effect until it had to have an effect. I don't know. It felt very Death Blossom. Everybody freaked out and started firing in all directions, hoping they'd hit something. This is not the reaction that I would expect from trained professional killers and soldiers. But then I guess the lack of real true effect or consistent effect on the lizards when they were hit. When the blurg count gets to a certain point, then all of a sudden the lasers start bothering them, and then they all fly off. Well, if nothing's hurting them, why don't they just keep eating everybody? Like, it's consistency, I guess.
They would have been better served. Now we're skipping ahead, but they would have been better served for the lizards to kill all the blurgs, because one of the issues we're going to have later on is the timing of Queel leaving town in the early morning and not making it to the Razor Crest before the speeder bikes can catch him.
That's a big plot hole for me.
It is, and that'll come up later. They would have been better served killing all the blurgs. If Queel's on foot, yeah, I'll buy it. Sure. Yeah, it would have taken him all day to walk out to the Razor Crest for sure, and then he could have been caught by the speeder bikes. But on a blurg, not so much. They shouldn't have been able to catch him.
But here, in this next scene, one of the things I noticed is the blur. I mean, everybody's walking in front of the blurg.
Yeah.
I mean, the blurg seems to be a pretty fast mover.
It is. That's my point.
It's domesticated, man. Mando in the first episode or second episode where he broke the will and the spirit of that blurg. Now it follows him around on the planet.
David, you made an excellent point a few minutes ago. I want to compliment you. Cara Dune hopping up on the blurg.
That was like a 30 to 45 second montage of him learning how to get on the blurg and walk with it. Come on.
Will gave her the pep talk. They were on the ship and he said, "You are a rebel trooper.
Yeah.
You've taken on the Empire. Certainly you can ride this blurg." And then she was like, "Yeah, I'm going to do it." And she hopped right up on the blurg.
Or Edwards doesn't want another montage. Just get on.
The next morning, Greef unexpectedly shoots his two comrades on the outskirts of town. He confesses to arranging a trap for Mando, but after the child healed him, he says he couldn't go through with it. Their plan is altered. Cara will accompany Mando, Greef, and the child's closed, empty pram into town. Greef will tell the client that Cara captured Mando. Once they are in close proximity, Mando will kill the client. Queel will take the child to the Razor Crest and activate security protocols.
Maybe that should have been the plan all along. Nope, I'm not opening it. We're doing this thing. I'm protecting the child. But again, it goes back to our conversation earlier about seems to be very trusting of everybody's stuff. When Greef spins around and shoots the two guys behind him, the reaction that Cara Dune and Mando have is they weren't ready for that. And so it would indicate to me that they weren't thinking that there was actually a trap, even though they talked about how it was going to be a trap. And then the change in plans, the deathbed conversion of Greef Karga from bad guy to best friend. It's convenient, but it's also, I mean, it's not beyond reason. But Din's more lucky than good at this point.
Why did Grief need to kill the 2 bounty hunters? Why couldn't he have just called off the plan? Changed my mind. I'm the leader of the bounty hunter guild on Navarro, and I've decided not to kill him. Here are some credits.
If they're not happy with the way things have shaken out on the planet because the Empire's come in and taken over and broken up the guild and all that kind of stuff, you would think that they would be motivated to kill the client as well. Now, maybe they, as bounty hunters, maybe they feel like with this change in plan, their payoff will be a lot less, so maybe they couldn't be trustworthy. Or maybe these guys survived the big gun battle in the street with all the Mandalorians earlier on in the season. You know, maybe they have a little beef with the Mando and that they can't be trusted. They were all on board to kill the Mando, but they would not necessarily be all on board to let him off the hook. I mean, there's a couple of possible explanations there that are not too far-fetched as to why they had to be killed, but it does make it is a good question to ask. If Grief Karga is the boss, then why can't he do boss things and tell these guys what to do?
To an earlier point from Sean, I thought Kara expressed an appropriate level of outrage at Grief's original plan. She was ready to kill him and leave.
That's a good point. It's the death by 1,000 paper cuts. Like, we see all these little lapses in judgment by, the Mando, and they start to add up to us asking serious questions about him. That's all.
Let me see your identification.
Near the town, the group recognizes a bigger problem, many more Imperials than expected. 2 biker scouts guard the entrance. They demand Grief's chain code before allowing the group to proceed. At the common house, the client is pleased to see Mando and the pram. Again, the number of stormtroopers exceeds Grief's estimates. The client compliments Mando's new Beskar armor and extols the virtues of Imperial rule prior to asking for the child. Grief tries to stall by saying the child is asleep. Just in time, the boss interjects. The client begins speaking with Moff Gideon's hologram at the bar.
And there'll be a more stark contrast to this later in the episode, but the Imperial remnant that's on this planet working for the client looks very much like the farthest from the center of whatever's left of the Empire. They're very lax. They've lost decorum. They've lost the military formality. But this whole scene when he goes into the common house, again, I love the client. Verner Herzog is so fantastic in this role. I absolutely just the sheer evil and menace that comes out of this guy. I mean, here he is talking about how wonderful the Empire it is and how it brings order and happiness and prosperity and peace and all this stuff to everywhere it touches. And you're thinking about, well, you blew up Alderaan and you've done all this other stuff. It's like, I don't know if it is what you're saying is really what you mean or what you think it is. Like when Krennic and Galen Erso are talking that, well, you had to start somewhere. Again, it's these guys they're true believers and they're full on committed to the Empire, and they will make an excuse for any atrocity. Yeah, I enjoyed this scene. I love it. And again, the whole back and forth between Grief Karga and the Mando about the number of Imperials. Well, you said that he only had 4 troopers. And he's like, well, he has 4 troopers with him in this room. Well, he's surrounded by hundreds of other troopers. And anyway, it's fun. I enjoyed it.
I enjoyed, in addition to the back and forth between Mando and Grief, Mando complaining about the number of Imperials in the town, I enjoyed the exchange. The biker scout offers Grief credits for Mando's helmet, and then Grief says, no way, it's going on my wall. It's going on your wall. Just go with it. I thought that was pretty funny. And then the last thing I'll mention in this scene is Verner Herzog does such a great job. He has a presence about him playing this character. That weird caress, he uses the back of his hand, rubs it across Mando's chest plate, and he's talking about the exquisite craftsmanship, and it's just so creepy and wonderful. And then he launches into the benefits of Imperial rule. But see, he clearly has a respect for the Mandalorians. And that first episode, I really felt like he was taunting Din Djarin, getting the Beskar back into the hands of the Mandalorians. That felt like a taunt. But in light of this episode, I think he meant it.
So I wanted to touch base real quickly on the client's outfit. I really liked the Imperial Cog medal that he had around his neck. Do we know what that's from? What he earned it for?
That's his Iron Cross.
Yeah, the actual ribbon, David, the black and silver ribbon is the exact same ribbon for the Iron Cross First Class that was issued by the German Army in World War I and World War II. Apparently, it's some kind of imperial honor.
Yep.
I don't think we've ever seen it on anybody else or something similar to that on anybody else in any of the canon stuff. Now, I don't know if it's pulled out of Legends or whatnot. He's an Imperial who doesn't wear a uniform, but clearly he's very powerful. It's cool.
The client takes a holographic call from Moff Gideon, his boss, the big boss. When asked about the child, the client repeats Grief's assertion, it is sleeping. Moff Gideon replies, you may want to check again, and suddenly blaster fire from the exterior kills all the Imperials, including the client. A row of death troopers and a troop transport, we're going to talk about the troop transport, and a troop transport's worth of stormtroopers fill the courtyard. Mando warns Queel with his communicator. The biker scouts at the entrance overhear the warning and fly away to intercept the Ugnaught. A TIE fighter with collapsible wings lands in the courtyard, and Moff Gideon, played by Giancarlo Esposito, disembarks. He taunts the heroes by confidently stating that in a few moments he will have the child. We see the biker scouts overtaking Queel. Ultimately, they kill him and take the child.
Well, first of all, I really like the concept of the hologram with basically a briefcase. I like the design of it. I thought it was pretty cool. This is obviously the first time that we get to see the bigger fish. And Moff Gideon is definitely the main bad guy, the bigger fish. Somebody definitely not to be trifled with, because within, 10 seconds of his introduction, he wipes out his own people. The troop transport is something that I think we've all kind of waited to see. You know, we saw it in comic books. We saw it in Rebels. We've seen it in many different forms, but we've never seen it in a live action situation. And I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I grew up really wanting a troop transport. The TIE fighter, the wings basically fold down and you're able to almost get to ground level with the pod. Really cool, really creative, really inventive. I really like that. And Quill riding back with his glasses on, the wind's blowing in his eyes that much that he needs to go into jet fighter mode. But I will say this, I like the fact that they killed off a major character. I mean, it adds tension, it adds more to the story, the struggle that they're having. I applaud them for taking that leap, not going the safe route. I'm all for this. And then for them to kill, for me, one of my favorite characters, the loss of him made it a lot more meaningful, a lot more drama for the show.
I'll work my way back since David finished on that. Killing Queel made me mad. He was one of my favorite characters in the show, and I did not like how he went out. We kind of talked earlier about the timing, and David mentioned this, whether or not Queel would have gotten back to the ship in time, or was the blurg moving fast enough for him to make it back to the ship in time. I guess the putting on of the goggles would imply yes, but man, I did not like seeing that. I thought it was kind of a tragic end to his character. I mean, you're talking about a guy who's been around for 300 years and he spent 250 of them in slavery, and he's only been free from the Empire for about 5 years, and now he gets shot in the back. It's just terrible. Like it was sad to me. I understand what Dave is saying about the raising of the drama or the stakes, so to speak, by killing off major characters, but the problem with killing off a major character is you've created something that people like and enjoy, and people are coming to your show to experience. I think it broke a lot of hearts. and it was sad to see him go. Likewise, I was upset about the death of the client. I thought that he was a great foil to the Mando. I thought he was a great character. I thought Werner Herzog's portrayal of him was just top shelf. Having said that, the fact that Moff Gideon can show up and just start butchering his own people in order to achieve an end does raise the stakes for the importance of what he's wanting to do with, or why he wants to possess the child. And again, we never really fully got an understanding of why or what was happening at the beginning when Mando went up and blew up the compound and got after Dr. Pershing and all that stuff. You know, the thing that we were talking about earlier, where Gideon shows up, and he shows up with he's got the first string varsity. All of his stormtroopers are shiny white. They are the stormtroopers that we got in episode 4. Man, these guys are first line Imperials. We have the Death Troopers, right? The Special Forces. He's got the cool TIE fighter with the folding wings. Like, these are the guys. We're here now. We're establishing the law and order again. We're bringing back the old ways, and there's no mercy. And right now, the number one Imperial goal is to get the child, and anyone who comes in the way of that goal is now dead. The folding wings on the TIE fighter is concept art for Force Awakens that was not used, but the guys on the show who have sifted through so much cool stuff and picked out little tidbits made great use of that. It was a very cool moment. It was a nice thing to see. So yeah, I mean, it's all, again, we've introduced now a new big baddie, had some action there. Everyone's in danger, and then they've killed all my favorite people. A lot happened there in a couple minutes.
Quill's departure from Mando, he has at least a few hours to ride on his blurg back to the Razor Crest, and the speeder bike's overtaking him. It's a little sketchy. But all of this is inconsistent because, on the one hand, you've got Death Troopers firing blindly into the Common House. You've got biker scouts firing at Quill riding his blurg, yet the Imperials stop short of breaching the Common House to look for the child. There are some weird inconsistencies, but no issue with taking out the client. It surprised me. Quill's death surprised me. I like that. I like the fact that the show's willing to take those chances. I just didn't like the way the client died. I thought his death could have served to really impress upon us the evil and the power of Moff Gideon. What I mean by that is, obviously Moff Gideon orders him killed, but wouldn't it have been more powerful if you forego the holographic call and you have the client go out into the courtyard to greet Moff Gideon as he lands, and then Moff Gideon just drives the Darksaber right through his chest? And I think you honor Werner Herzog's performance a little bit more and his role a little bit more if you do it face to face. Then you eliminate some of the inconsistency with the random fire into the canteen and possibly hitting the child.
I totally agree with you with that. I mean, face to face is a lot more intense and dramatic. That might be a little too much in Disneyland, but yeah, I think that would have been a lot more purposeful, and would have definitely given Moff Gideon more clout.
Yeah, I think that probably would have been better for, like you say, both of them. It would have been better for Werner Herzog's character, and it would have also established the real level of evil in Moff Gideon. Of course, the reason why we had to do it the way we had to do it is because we are establishing a moment. We're establishing the standoff, which is going to pay off in a later episode. But to Jeff's point, you have him go out in the courtyard, he gets killed. They couldn't do it with the Darksaber, though. That they were saving that for the last second of the last episode of the season. And the wild shooting thing is definitely an issue, because if your stated purpose is to take the child intact at all costs, wildly blowing things up and shooting into buildings and chasing him down on a moving object and firing at him, like, it's just too much room for error. And if you really want to see Moff Gideon kill some Imperials, bring him back a dead Baby Yoda.
So we've come to the end of chapter 7, a scale of 1 to 10.
8.5. I put it in the top 3 of the 8. Deborah Chow did an amazing job. Intense, heartwarming, well executed.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a solid 8. It was well directed. The cinematography was great. The acting, again, everybody involved, fantastic. It was the most Star Wars episode in this show. And I think it was probably one of the most, I guess, well executed / serious shows. So yeah, I would solid 8 for sure. It was one of the better episodes of the season.
I thought direction from Deborah Chow was excellent. I liked where the ending took us. The stakes were raised. Things looked and felt very bleak for the heroes. And that's the way part 1 of a season finale is supposed to go. So I will go 7.5 for this one.
Galactic Initiative is not authorized or endorsed by Lucasfilm Limited. The name Star Wars and all related materials are registered trademarks of Lucasfilm Limited, a subsidiary of the Walt Disney Company, all rights reserved. Galactic Initiative is a registered trademark, and other product and company names are trademarks of their respective holders. Use does not imply affiliation or endorsement.